They fined me $1.2 million for a child's treehouse. Public notice on my door. Cameras in my face. A blonde, pink-suited HOA president smirking while my 10-year-old watched me take his ladder down. That's not keeping values high. That's humiliation weaponized. If I don't pay, they lien my home. They erase my son's childhood and call it policy, but here's the twist. I found something in the land records they never wanted me to see, and it turns their power to dust. Watch to the end to see the legal move that flips this entire HOA, exposes a secret money stream, and delivers justice that sticks. Drop a like and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? The notice was stapled to my front door like a threat, red block letters. A number that didn't make sense to the human brain, $1,200,000. My fingers went numb before the shock turned hot. The neighborhood cameras were already up, phones peering from porches. The HOA president stood on the sidewalk with her clipboard head tilted, watching me read what she'd done to my family. Unapproved vertical structure, the letter said, my son's treehouse, 2 weekends of cedar and screws and a rope ladder that squeaked when he laughed. I'd built it low, safe, tucked into the elm behind our fence. No neighbors complained. Birds approved. My kid loved it. That apparently was the crime. I pulled the ladder down under her stare. Each rung hit the grass with a thud that felt like an accusation. My boy stood in the doorway holding a wood screw in his small hand like evidence from a hit and run. He didn't cry, he asked a question that cut deeper. Did we do something wrong? I wanted to say no. I wanted to explain corruption and control and people who mistake authority for morality. Instead, I swallowed gravel and told him we'd handle it. The letter escalated in legalese, daily compounding fines, threatened lien, safety violation, photos attached. They'd photographed my son's joy and labeled it hazardous. There was a deadline, 72 hours to remove the structure or face additional penalties, 3 days to erase a childhood memory and pretend it never mattered. I called the number on the notice. A volunteer answered with a script. I asked for the president, the line transferred, her tone was smooth glass. You're out of compliance, the board has spoken. There's no danger, I said. I'm a surveyor, I build to code, inspect it. Or give me the variance process. Appeal denied. On what grounds? Neighborhood standards. Show me where. Sir, you're being difficult. I'm being legal. Silence, then the flick of a knife. We enforce, you comply. Or we proceed. She hung up. Anger sharpened my mind. I spread plat maps on the kitchen table. Aerials, lot lines like veins, easements like scars. I've spent a decade reading the ground for a living. Dirt doesn't lie. Paper, though paper can be made to lie beautifully. That's what they count on, that you'll drown in it, that you'll argue feelings while they weaponize filings. I pulled the subdivision's original survey. I traced the rear boundary with a pencil past our fence into the trees. There was a sliver of land back there I'd never asked questions about, something weird in the legal description. Meets and bounds that didn't match the HOA signage. A jog where a straight line should be. I flipped to county records on my laptop. Search, cross-reference. Old timber company names, tax parcels in the assessor's grid like a chessboard. The HOA acts like kings and queens, but the board is always bigger than they remember. I found the parcel. 19 acres, timbered, tax delinquent, not HOA common area, not parkland, owner. A long-dormant LLC with a P.O. box and unpaid bills. Status, subject to a sealed bid auction in 30 days, the air changed. I stared at the treehouse stump through the window. The elm held its silence. My son's screw lay on the table next to the plat, a bright dot on an old map. I reached for my phone and called a friend at a local credit union who owed me a favor for finding a boundary error that saved him a lawsuit. Need a cashier's check in force within a month, I said. Backed by collateral, you'll get your paperwork. What's the play? Land, he exhaled. That your HOA? They think bylaws rule the world, I said. I'm going to teach them what ground feels like when it moves. Night took the kitchen. I kept tracing easements, access. The old timber road cut through the back lots like a hidden artery. If I got that parcel, I could close it, lock it, and force them to taste what they tried to feed us. Not rage, not vandalism. Law. I put the screw in my pocket. I tucked the notice into a binder labeled evidence. Then I wrote one sentence on a yellow sticky note and stuck it to the door where the fine had hung. We don't pay bullies, we buy their road. Tomorrow, the county recorder. And then the steps of a courthouse where people in suits think they choreograph every breath. They forgot about surveyors. We count breaths in inches and iron. We draw lines no one sees until they hit them. The county recorder's office smells like dust and toner and old secrets. I signed the log, slid into a metal chair, and pulled microfilm like I was reeling in a shark. Deeds from the 70s. Easements recorded in blue ink cursive. A timber company consolidating parcels like a quiet empire. Then the cells, the splits, the homeowner explosion, cul-de-sacs blooming like flowers after rain. The HOA was a late invention. The ground was older. I traced the 19-acre parcel. Same owner, 23 years. Delinquent taxes. Multiple certified notices returned. A sliver of no man's land behind us that everyone assumed belonged to the HOA because they posted friendly signs and walked on it long enough to believe myth replaced title. I printed the legal description, bearings and distances, monument references. The old timber road scar line matched the callouts. Access from the county road via a recorded, unused easement nobody in a polo shirt had bothered to read. My heartbeat evened. Paper can be a weapon, yes, but paper can also be a shield when you know where to hold it. I asked the clerk about auction timing. She pointed to a bulletin board. Public notice, 30 days, sealed bids. Cashier's check, buyer assumes back taxes. How much? She told me. It stung, but it wasn't a death sentence. Not when weighed against $1.2 million and a lien that could swallow our house. Back home, another letter from the HOA waited like a cobra in the mailbox. Non-compliance escalation. They'd added photo attachments. They'd labeled my kid's tree as a visual nuisance. They'd cited a clause about unsanctioned recreational apparatus visible from common areas. The tone was dry, efficient, dead-eyed. I imagined them drafting these under fluorescent light, calling it community service. I scanned it, filed it, labeled it Exhibit B, then I walked the back fence line with a tape and a can of orange marking paint. The ground had a slope to it, the kind of slope that keeps secrets until a hard rain. I found the old timber road by field before I saw it, a depression in the duff, a line of stones that didn't match the randomness of nature. Tires had rolled here decades ago. This was access. This was leverage. A teenager cut through the brush and froze when he saw me, hoodie, backpack. He glanced at the fence. Just going to the trails, he mumbled, defensive before I spoke. Not for long, I said, more to the trees than to him. He shrugged and slipped away. The sound of his steps promised 10 more like him by afternoon. The forest had always been assumed public because nobody had said otherwise with authority. Authority is a boundary you can point at. I drafted a plan. Step 1, raise cash. I called my lender friend. We talked collateral risk timelines. He believed in my competence more than my cause, which was perfect. Belief in cause makes people sloppy. Belief in math makes them precise. Step 2, assemble neighbors not for sympathy but for documentation. I needed stories, dates, photos, names. Every time the HOA used a ruler to measure joy, I wanted it in my folder when the world started asking questions. Step 3, information. If I moved, they'd strike back. I needed to know their patterns, their tells, their weak joints where legal pressure could make the whole thing groan. That night I bought a fresh suit folder and labeled it strategy. I wrote 3 words on the tab: jurisdiction, access, exposure. My son put the ladder rungs in a neat line on the garage floor. He was building something with absence. I knelt beside him. We're going to fix this. By building it again, by making sure nobody can do this to anyone again. He nodded like a soldier accepts a map. He didn't need revenge. He needed safety that couldn't be revoked by a smile and a vote. I slept badly. I dreamed of orange ribbon and gavel strikes. I woke before dawn, packed a thermos, and headed to the office. I had paid work that day, actual clients who needed boundaries settled before a sale. It made me sharper. Survey stakes in the morning, war stakes at night. On my way home, I drove slow through the cul-de-sac. The HOA president waved from a conversation like she was running a parade. I didn't stop. I memorized faces. People who followed rules because fear pays dividends. People who would look away when someone else bled. People who'd help when they realized it was their turn next. The world divides on lines you can't always see, but they're there. And once you find them, you can carry them like wire. You can string them up. You can say, "This is mine." And watch the masks crack when they realize you have the paperwork to prove it. I showed up 10 minutes early and sat in the last row. Metal chairs, stale coffee. A flag in the corner that deserved better than lip service. The board table faced us like a stage. The HOA president ran her finger down the agenda, practiced calm. She didn't look my way. Power only looks forward. It assumes compliance trails behind. They started with small triumphs, a landscaping contract, a reminder about trash bins, then the slide deck, neighborhood standards, photos of porches, fences, paint chips held against siding like they were judging skin. Laughter rippled at the right places. The room was heavy with people who don't think they're cruel, they think they're tidy. My name came up. Item 7, enforcement update. She didn't say my son's name. She said unauthorized structure. She said danger. She said liability. She listed the fine with a cleaned-up smile and moved on like it was a parking ticket. I didn't stand. I didn't interrupt. I let the sentence sink, spread, recruit enemies without effort. A retired man in a ball cap raised his hand. My variance, out of order. He sat down like he'd been slapped. A woman with a nervous voice tried next. We were fined for a pumpkin. Seasonal displays are addressed on page 12. Ma'am, it was a Tuesday. Next item, little cuts, paper cuts, bleed slow, die tired. I took out a notebook and wrote names beside details. Tom. Mailbox height, widow with porch color, veteran with a flagpole notice. A pattern doesn't need a conspiracy. It needs a person who loves rules more than people. When the meeting adjourned, I waited by the door. I approached Tom first. Walk me through the mailbox thing, dates, letters, photos, I'll scan them. He gave me a look that measured my spine, then he nodded. She said it was 3 inches too tall. Was it? He held his thumb under his eyes as if he could still see the line. Maybe one. Others drifted near. A dad whose kid had chalked dinosaurs on the sidewalk. A nurse fined for a potted herb being visible from the street. Everyone talked, then looked over my shoulder like we were doing something wrong by collecting truth. The president swept past, perfume cut through the coffee. Sir, your balance has increased due to noncompliance with removal deadlines. She recited numbers like scripture. I didn't blink. You ever read the original plat? I asked softly. She smiled like I'd told a joke. We've managed this community for 12 years. That wasn't the question. A flicker, a hairline crack. Good night, she said, moving on. I handed Tom a card. Bring everything, I'll scan it, I'll return it. No promises except this: if the ground changes, the rules fail. What ground? He asked. The ground they think they're standing on. The next day, my dining table filled with paper. Letters, notices, photos of stern signs and petty shame. I sorted by offense type. I highlighted dates. I drew a timeline of enforcement spikes around holidays and elections. Control is seasonal. It feeds when people are distracted. I booked the county auditorium for a community records night. Public space. Neutral. I paid the fee in cash. I called the local reporter who once did a piece on a boundary dispute I'd fixed. I didn't pitch drama, I pitched documents, then I drafted the slide I'd show first. The number, $1,200,000, followed by a photo of a small cedar platform with a rope ladder and a note. Child not pictured because he deserves privacy. The email blast took me 10 minutes. Subject line, what $1.2 million looks like when you weaponize paper. The body was sterile, date, time, purpose. Attached, a link to a shared folder labeled exhibits. I went to the garage. My son had arranged the ladder rungs into a rectangle. He looked up with paint on his fingers. Is it coming back? Yes, I said. But not like before. How then? Stronger, safer, and nobody will ever be able to take it again. I sealed the invite envelopes. I walked them to the mailbox just as the streetlights burned on. Across the cul-de-sac, blinds twitched. Phones glowed blue behind curtains. The stage was set. I didn't need speeches. I needed the sheriff to read a line off a stake. I needed cameras pointed in the right direction. And I needed the timing right. On my kitchen wall, I wrote a date in black marker, auction day. If I hit that mark first, the rest would fall like dominoes. Courthouse steps at 10 a.m. The sky had that hard blue that makes promises without caring if it keeps them. The deputy's clipboard flashed in the sun. A handful of bidders hovered in a loose orbit, guarding envelopes like they contained air. I wore my father's old jacket. Lucky not because it won things, but because it reminded me who I serve. The wind smelled like paper and winter coming. Parcel 17B, the deputy called, 19.04 acres. Timbered, rear adjacent to Maple Ridge subdivision. I looked down at my envelope. It held a cashier's check that hurt to assemble. My savings. A small loan secured against a truck I kept immaculate. A favor from a credit union manager who trusted numbers more than politics. I had run the math, back taxes, filing fees. My margin was thin but honest. Sealed bids, the deputy said. Step forward. I slid mine into the box. No one met my eyes. That was fine. They didn't know yet what I wanted it for. They thought timber or a cabin or a future flip. They didn't know I wanted a gate. The deputy sliced envelopes with a small knife. The sound was delicate like surgery. He read numbers. My heart pounded once for each digit. A man in a tan coat frowned when his number lost altitude against mine. No one went higher. Silence. A pause as thick as oak, then the gavel. Sold. The word landed. The world didn't explode. No music swelled. Just a small circle of people adjusting their expectations while mine expanded to fit a forest. Paperwork inside. Sign here. Initial there. The clerk slid copies across the counter like dealing cards in a game I finally understood. I tucked the deed into a folder labeled title. I ran my fingers over the embossed seal like it was raised terrain. On the sidewalk, a reporter from local radio recognized me and lifted her microphone. You're the Treehouse dad, right? I'm a surveyor, I said. And a father. What do you plan to do with the parcel? Steward it, I said, and make the boundaries clear. She blinked, sensing a story she didn't yet have the shape for. Can we talk later? Tomorrow, I said. When the deed's recorded. On the drive home, my hands shook on the wheel, not from fear, not entirely from adrenaline, but from the bizarre feeling of being perfectly right in a world that punishes that. I parked, walked straight to the back fence with a roll of orange ribbon and a bag of survey stakes. The forest waited, indifferent. I stepped under the canopy and found the old road with the ease of a man who knows what the earth remembers. I set the first stake, a bright flag snapped in the breeze. I set another 40 feet down, then another at the bend where the slope drops toward the creek. Neighbors watched through fences. I didn't look up. I measured, I hammered. I marked the line that paperwork had just made real. By dusk, the old road was a dotted line of flame-colored flags. I dragged in a steel gate I'd bought on the way and set it at the mouth like a jaw. Tomorrow, I'd mount it proper with posts and concrete and a lock you couldn't argue with. Tonight, it stood like a promise. The HOA president drove by slow, as if her car had suddenly discovered the concept of humility. She didn't stop. Good, let the rumor travel before the paper does. In the kitchen, my son sat with his homework spread like a small city. I put the deed on the table. He touched the seal. Is that ours? It's everyone's who respects it, I said, and it's never theirs again. He smiled, small, private, like a secret finally turning friendly. I drafted 3 letters before bed. One to the county recorder enclosing the deed for immediate record. One to the sheriff's office notifying them of a new gate on a private road and offering contact numbers for emergencies, professional, polite, lawful. And one to the HOA board, certified mail, return receipt requested. Notice, adjacent property jurisdiction. Your authority ends at the recorded boundary of Maple Ridge. Effective immediately, all informal access points to Parcel 17B are closed. Unauthorized entry will be considered trespass. See attached legal description. I didn't sleep. I lay awake listening to the house breathe. Not rage. Not gloating. Calm. The kind of calm that comes when you put a stake in the ground and know it won't move in a storm. Tomorrow they will test the gate. They will gather at the fence and perform. I will meet them with paper and steel and a sheriff who reads lines out loud. Calculated revenge, not rage, law over chaos. And a forest that finally had a guardian. At first light I dug, post-hole digger biting cold earth, breath fogging. Each scoop felt like paying back interest they'd stolen in quiet. I set 2 treated 6x6s in concrete and checked plumb twice. Steel gate lifted with a grunt and the memory of my father's voice. Measure once, said it like you mean it. Hinges pinned, lock bar aligned. When the latch clanged shut, the sound traveled the old road like a warning bell. Then the sign. Not homemade, not petty, aluminum, reflective, clean fonts. Private Forest Reserve access BY permit only. Below it, trespass statute, survey license number, parcel ID. A QR code that linked to my public forest code. Conservation use, limited research access, no recreational entry, no exceptions. I wanted parents to see a system, not a grudge. I walked the line and hung orange ribbons where the timber road snaked behind the houses. Bright staccato notes against dark fir. The forest felt awake, not angry, organized. By noon, the first test came, 3 teenagers in cross-trainers, backpacks slung. They vaulted the drainage swale like they'd done it 100 times. I stepped from the trees and said nothing, just pointed once at the sign. They slowed, read, looked at me, then at the lock. One tried a laugh that didn't survive the gravity of the metal. They backed off, muttering. Word would spread faster than any email. I sent the certified letter to the HOA with the recorded deed attached. I used their language against them, tight and polite. Notice of adjacent property jurisdiction. Revocation of informal access. Non-HOA land. I copied the sheriff, I copied the county, I posted the forest code on a small site I'd registered at midnight. No trash talk. Just rules and reasons. The call came an hour later, the president, voice chilled. You can't block community access, those trails have been used for years. By assumption, I said, not by right. Your authority ends at your plat boundary. You're acting in bad faith, I'm acting in recorded fact. You're hurting children. You find one for joy, I said, and let the sentence hang. She regrouped. The board will issue a notice. I'll file it under fiction. She spat air and hung up. Good, she'd take it public, she'd frame it as selfishness. I needed that. Outrage is loud and loud pulls cameras. At 2, a couple of parents rolled up with strollers and indignation. They filmed themselves at the gate, demanding I open our trails. I asked for their permits. They said community. I pointed to the parcel map laminated on the sign. Boundaries cut the story in half. One man tried the handle. The lock didn't care. He yanked harder. The hinge didn't care. He took 2 steps toward me, jaw out. I raised my phone and said, you just escalated on a posted boundary. Sheriff's on speed dial. Your choice is walk away or get an education you won't enjoy. He blinked, stepped back, not because he respected me, because steel makes decisions simple. I went home and opened the neighborhood group app I usually ignore. The thread was a landfill fire. He stole our woods. He's a menace. He's dangerous. I posted one message, short, calm. A link to the county recording and the forest code, facts in place of fireworks. Within minutes, she chimed in. We will not be intimidated. She called an emergency compliance walkthrough at my back fence tomorrow at 2 p.m., invited the board, concerned parents, and beautifully, local authorities. Thank you, I thought. I texted the sheriff's public liaison, a woman who respects boundaries because she enforces them. I said I'd appreciate a deputy present to read the legal line if asked. She replied with a thumbs up and a time. I also texted the reporter. You want your story tomorrow, my back fence, 2 p.m. bring a camera that hears words. Evening, I walked the property again, checked the lock, photographed the ribbons, timestamped everything. Paper is brittle unless you wrap it around facts you can touch. The gate hummed under my palm like a sleeping animal. At dinner, my son asked if we were safe. Safer than we were yesterday, I said. He nodded, then slid his math worksheet over. We worked the problems. Numbers, certainty, lines that add up. I slept with the deed under my pillow like a kid with a lucky coin, not superstition, proximity. In the morning, they would come to my fence and perform. I would hand them their reflection and let the law speak in a voice that didn't shake. 2 p.m., the cul-de-sac filled like a dam break, strollers, folded arms, phones angled for outrage. A drone buzzed above like a lazy wasp. The board stood shoulder to shoulder, their confidence arranged in a row. The president took center, chin high, words already loaded. I felt my pulse steady, slow, almost cold. This wasn't rage. This was surgery. A deputy stood to my right, hat low, thumbs hooked, eyes bored in the way of men who know paper beats pitchforks. The reporter set up on a tripod, checked audio, gave me a quick nod. The forest behind us breathed a green that swallowed sound. The president opened with a scolding sermon about community spirit, long-standing access, selfish obstruction, applause from the parents. I let the noise roll by. When it dipped, I raised a laminated plat map and pointed at the bright orange stake behind me. This, I said, is the recorded boundary of Maple Ridge. Your authority ends here. I tapped the line with a surveyor's pencil. Everything behind this point belongs to parcel 17B, recorded yesterday. Deed here, title clear. Murmurs. A phone zoomed on the page. The deputy stepped forward and read the parcel description from my printout. Bearings. Distances, monuments. The room, because it felt like a room, went quieter as his voice removed fiction like a peel. A dad shouted, "Our kids need the trails. They need leaders who don't weaponize paper against them," I said. And they need to learn what boundaries mean when they exist to keep them safe. The reporter asked, "Is this related to the fine?" I held up a binder labeled $1.2 million for a trehouse. Gasps. Camera lenses inhaled. They documented my son's joy, called it danger, and tried to lien my home for more than this forest cost. I bought the forest. Then I posted rules with reasons. They don't like not being the only ones with paper. The president stepped forward, reached toward my binder. The deputy's voice cut flat and sharp. "Ma'am, don't." She recoiled a fraction, then remembered the cameras and straightened. "Sir, your balance continues to accrue," she said loud. "Every day you refuse to comply." I looked past her to the parents. "Would you like to see where your enforcement money went?" The letters. The fines for mailbox heights and porch colors and chalk drawings. "Bring your documents tomorrow night, town hall, we put it on the record." A parent muttered, "What record?" "The one that outlives this week's anger." A boy tugged his mother's sleeve. "Mom, that's the tree guy." He meant surveyor. I felt that land in my chest. The president regained her footing. "Our council will be in touch." "Good, I like letters," I said. "They age well." The crowd fractured, half glared. Some looked thoughtful, like they'd tasted a new word. A few slipped to my side, quiet. Tom tapped my elbow. "I brought my mailbox file," he whispered, eyes wet with something older than paint. "Tomorrow," I said. The reporter filmed a final shot of the gate, the orange ribbons bright as warning flares. She handed me a card. "If you have documents." "I have a library," I said. The board retreated in a stiff cluster. The drone drifted away. The deputy tipped his hat. "Call if they hop the line." "They won't," I said, "not with cameras rolling." Alone at the fence, I listened to the forest settle. A wind moved through the canopy like a low chorus. I put my hand on the gate again. The cold of the steel felt like a promise kept. At home, I opened the neighborhood app and posted a single square graphic, tomorrow's town hall time and place. Below it, 3 bullets: bring your letters, bring your photos. Bring your silence and let paper speak. I sharpened my pencils. I charged the scanner. I reviewed my opening sentence until it fit like a key. Injustice loves darkness. Paper loves light. Tomorrow we flip the switch. Folding chairs under fluorescent hum. A low stage. A flag that didn't ask permission to be respected. I placed color-coded binders across a table like instruments. PLATS, statutes, timeline, exhibits. The reporter set her camera. The deputy leaned against a wall, arms crossed, eyes resting on nothing and everything. They filed in, nervous, angry, curious. The board came late, the president scanning for allies like a lighthouse that only shines on itself. I felt the room tighten when she sat. I didn't warm up. I didn't thank anyone. I clicked to slide 1, the number. $1,200,000 in red against white, gasps. Then a photo of cedar planks under an elm with no child in frame, only a rope ladder like a sentence cut mid-word. "This," I said, "is what weaponized paper looks like." I didn't look at her, I called names. Tom, he stood. I held up his notice, mailbox height nonconforming, 3 inches, he said, they find me the price of a week's groceries. Next, Mrs. Lang, porch color, notices in triplicate, photos of paint swatches. They made me repaint 3 times, she said, voice small but steady. My husband just died. Then a veteran, flagpole. They called it a hazard, he said, staring at the floor. Silence rolled like slow thunder. I clicked to a boundary map, the orange line pulsed. Their authority ends here, I said, tapping. They extended it with tone, not law. I held up the deed, the seal flashed. The forest is private, posted. Permits for conservation use only. Kids will learn there with their schools, not as props in a board's power fantasy. The president tried to interrupt. Out of context, I kept moving, letters, dates. Emails with friendly reminders that read like debt collection. I laid out a timeline of enforcement spikes around holidays, exam weeks, flu seasons, the times people are too tired to fight. Patterns are motives printed. A dad stood, hands shaking. We just want the trails. You want your kids safe, I said. Tell them what a boundary is and why it matters. Tell them what admitted control looks like and what consent looks like. Make both visible. I slid a thumb drive across the table to the reporter. Every document you've seen, redacted for privacy, publish the truth and let people decide. The president smiled, too bright, baseless theatrics. Our counsel, my counsel, I said, filed for declaratory judgment this morning. Jurisdiction, harassment, restraint, preservation of records. I looked at the board. That last one matters, delete nothing. A tremor in the room. People who never considered metadata felt it move under their feet. I ended with a link projected 20 feet wide, a public folder labeled Community Evidence. Then I asked one question. Who here has a letter they were ashamed to show a neighbor? Hands rose, hesitant, then higher, more. You were never the problem, I said. Paper doesn't make tyrants, silence does. Applause cracked open like a storm, not cheering. Relief with teeth. After, a line formed at my table. Photos, flash drives, stories bitten into small, digestible facts. The deputy picked up a binder, flipped pages, nodded once. The reporter's phone buzzed nonstop. The board left in a tight knot. The president glanced back once, calculating a counterattack, and found none that didn't end in light. I packed the binders. Tom helped, hands steady now. What next? He asked. Paper, I said. Then court. Outside, the night had that post-rain clarity that makes edges crisp. I looked up through streetlight glow and felt the forest at my back like a steady hand. We had shifted the room. Tomorrow we shift the record. Dawn. Coffee strong enough to stand a spoon. I signed the retainer. My attorney, gray-templed, quiet, lethal, reviewed my timeline like a surgeon reading vital signs. We go narrow and deep, he said. Jurisdiction, harassment, restraint. Records, preservation. Then we widen fiduciary breach, selective enforcement, self-dealing if we find it. If, I asked, he smiled without warmth. People who dress oppression as compliance always leave a receipt. By 10 a.m., filings hit the clerk's desk. The declaratory judgment petition drew a line the board could feel under their shoes. The TRO for harassment told them their late-night letters and driveway ambushes would now carry consequences. The preservation order froze their delete keys in place. Subpoena drafts waited like arrows above the threshold. At noon, the reporter's segment aired. $1.2 million fine over child's treehouse sparks legal firestorm. Dad buys forest, closes HOA access. My inbox detonated, not with trolls, with people from 3 counties sending PDFs of their own HOA nightmares. Different zip codes, same tone, same smirk in the margins. At 2, the sheriff served the board in person. The video hit the neighborhood app before the papers cooled. The president accepted service with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Someone in the background whispered, "Can she do that?" The deputy answered with his hat, "Yes." I posted the forest code to the county website's community bulletin. 1 page, 10 rules, conservation, safety. Permits for schools and scouts case by case. No recreational access period pending litigation, not punishment. Policy, let them call it petty, I'd hand them policy until they learned the taste of procedure. Online the comments split, parents who wanted trails, owners who wanted peace. Spectators who wanted blood, I starved all of them, no rants, no replies, just links to filings and timestamps. Then a quiet ping from my attorney. We have something, he said, voice wrapped in paper. An email from a burner account, attachments. Invoices, transfers, an LLC I didn't recognize receiving architectural review consulting fees. The listed manager's address matched a P.O. box I'd seen on HOA stationery. Could be smoke, he cautioned, could be heat. Turn on the fan, I said. We drafted supplemental counts in pencil and set them aside until chain of custody was clean. He reached for the phone to the AG's office. Timing mattered. We weren't fishing, we were building a pier. Evening, I walked the forest edge. The gate felt heavier in a good way, as if the filings added density to the steel. I checked the lock, then the ribbon line. A hawk wrote a thermal above, casual and absolute. I thought about rage, the kind that burns out men like me. I kept it caged, not repressed, aimed. Back home, my son sat at the table drawing a blueprint. The treehouse as he remembered it improved, railings higher, stairs wider, solar lanterns. He'd drawn the forest boundary as a bold line you could color inside. When can we build it, he asked. When the judge signs a piece of paper, I said. The kind they can't ignore. He nodded, satisfied with the answer because it had a step and an outcome. Kids thrive on sequence, tyrants thrive on fog. We were building systems, not scenes. I printed a new slide for the next community meeting, 3 bullets beneath the word update, 1 court filing submitted, 2 sheriff served board, 3 forest code posted, no adjectives. Facts are better theater than any flourish when people are hungry for ground. Night dropped. I lined up tomorrow's tasks. Notarize declarations, collect 2 more neighbor statements, scan old plat corrections, verify that the county's system reflected the deed. I sharpened my pencils again, the small rituals you do when you're steadying a ship no one believed you could sail. In bed, I listened to the house. I pictured the courtroom, wood, seal, the judge who dislikes drama. I pictured her signing orders that make bullies speak softer. I pictured the look on my son's face when the first cedar plank went up and stayed, and in that picture there was no president, no board. Just a line of law and a boy climbing toward a small roof under a big sky. It arrived like a dare, a manila envelope on my porch, rain-pocked, heavier than it looked. No return address, no note. I carried it inside like it might go off. At the table under the kitchen light, I slid a knife along the seam and spilled out receipts, QuickBooks screenshots, emails with subject lines that sounded innocent until you read the invoices beneath. Architectural review consulting, color conformity audit, expedited variance evaluation, dollar amounts that added up to a habit, transfers to a friendly contractor, then out to a consulting LLC, manager address. A P.O. box I'd seen printed on HOA letterhead. Not proof yet, but a map. I called my attorney. He arrived fast, eyes already scanning. We built a chain of custody right there. Timestamp photos, index pages, seal and evidence sleeves. He was careful with his words. This could be smoke, he said, or it could be the engine. I opened an email thread marked urgent, attachments. An advisory memo from the president to the board about capturing value from enforcement. She never wrote the words profit. She wrote sustainability. She wrote offsets. She wrote community benefit. The money moved anyway. We prepared supplements for the AG. Clean, redacted, no theatrics. I sent the reporter 3 pages, transactions, calendar overlaps with enforcement spikes, and a list of homeowners encouraged to use preferred vendors when the HOA flagged violations. The reporter's voice changed pitch. On the record, she asked. On paper, I said. By morning, the story detonated, not a blog rumor, a radio lead, a site headline, an evening teaser. The treasurer cracked first, resigned on camera, voice dry as chalk. I asked her to stop, he said, eyes glassed with regret. She said it was standard practice. The board splintered, statements tripping over each other. The president went live, denying, dismissing, accusing. A smear by a disgruntled homeowner. She mispronounced my last name, small thing. It told me she'd never cared to learn it. Sheriff's vehicles rolled slow that night, service of preservation orders, devices to be mirrored. Not a raid, something colder, the methodical sound of a system waking up. On the neighborhood app, parents who'd been loud about trails turned quiet. You can shout past a gate. You can't shout past a spreadsheet. I walked the forest edge with a flashlight and listened to the town breathe differently. The wind moved the cedars like firm hands settling an unruly room. My son met me at the back door with a drawing. Our treehouse plans revised again, bracing reinforced, railing higher, a small brass plate drawn on the post. He'd lettered it carefully. For kids told no when safe was possible. I held his paper in my hands, the weight of it absurdly equal to the envelope that started the unraveling. One dream on standard printer stock. Another dream collapsing under its own pages. My phone buzzed with a number I didn't know. A voice whispered, "I can't watch this anymore." A board member's spouse. She pointed us to a cloud folder mislabeled Minutes Archive. Inside, draft budgets with a line item for compliance review services, buried under maintenance. The world loves to hide things where no one looks because no one expects to find rot wearing a safety vest. We added it to the index, filed an amended complaint with counts for self-dealing and unjust enrichment. My attorney didn't grin. He set his jaw the way men do when they feel the ground answer their weight. I slept for an hour, woke like a diver breaking surface. The house was dark. The kitchen was a silhouette of our war, binders, stamps. The envelope emptied lay like a skin. The spell was broken. The tone in people's voices was different now, as if they could finally hear themselves. Morning would bring more statements, more panic, more spin. We would meet it with the one thing panic hates, sequence, step, 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 one line at a time, one gate at a time. One boy's ladder rebuilt under a sky without permission slips for wonder. Keep watching. The reckoning isn't loud, it's loud's end. We moved like rain through dry brush, petition sheets, clipboards, neighbors knocking on doors they once avoided. No speeches, just a sentence and a pen. Recall the board. People signed like they were exhaling poison. Signatures bled across blocks. A garage table became a command post. We tracked counts on a whiteboard that used to hold soccer schedules. When we crossed the threshold, the room didn't cheer. It tightened focused. The hard part was next. The board called a special meeting to control the stage. We picked a bigger room and brought the crowd with us. The president walked in late, face composed, voice syruped. She called the stories distractions, the money routine, the trail closure vindictive. When her eyes landed on the sheriff's deputy standing near the aisle, the script frayed. We handed her the recall petition. The pages rustled like leaves in a storm, ballots printed, volunteers counted under phone cameras. Silence weighed each number. The deputy read the final count twice because law respects repetition. The board lost. The room didn't erupt, it breathed. A tight, relieved breath that smelled like old fear leaving. Resignations came with practiced dignity. The president didn't resign, she clung. I owe continuity to this community, she said, chin up like a mast in dead wind. My attorney approached her counsel in the hallway and laid out our terms in simple English. Void every fine, release every lien, repay what you took, install an independent monitor, publish an apology drafted by counsel and approved by the court. He didn't bargain, he set a table. They sent a settlement feeler that read like a winded runner. Reduce your fine and we'll consider adjustments. I slid it back across the metaphorical table. Void my fine, all fines, and bind it with a consent decree. Or see us in court. They blinked. They'd never met a homeowner who wouldn't take a coupon for his dignity. That evening we gathered at the forest gate, not a protest, a reading. I held up the recorded covenant I just drafted with my attorney and a notary who didn't smile. Permanent prohibition of recreational access to Parcel 17B by members and households of the Maple Ridge HOA. Clean language. No loopholes, a line in dirt that would outlive all of us. A father stepped forward, voice rough. Even our kids. I looked past him at the families who'd come to every meeting, who'd handed me files without pride or shame, only need. Actions have consequences, I said. Children learn them, adults should too. When you weaponize power against children, you don't get their playground back. But our schools will come, our scouts, our youth programs. Stewardship, not entitlement. His jaw worked around words he didn't speak. He nodded once sharp, a small surrender to gravity. Online flames tried to rekindle. He's obsessed. He's punishing kids. I starved the fire with paper and silence. The reporter published a follow-up, Treasury irregularities, recall results, quotes from people who never wanted a camera but wanted their porch back. I walked home beside my son under a sky rinsed clean by wind. He asked something I hadn't planned for. Will she say sorry? Not to us, I said, but to the record, yes. He accepted it like kids accept weather. Notice, adjust, go on, midnight. My phone pinged with the draft settlement terms from their side, stripped of bravado. The words we needed were there, hiding at the end like thieves caught in a pantry. Void, release, repay, monitor, apologize. Add the consent decree, court enforceable, and we had a deal worth paper. I stared at that last word, apology. It wouldn't heal what she'd broken, but it would teach, not just our street. The next one and the next. Before sleep, I wrote a note in my planner under tomorrow's date. Bring a brass plate, not for the gate, for the cedar beam that would hold my son's weight, for memory, not malice. For a line in dirt that now had letters. The courtroom held that particular quiet you only find where consequences live. Wood polished by years of hands, a seal on the wall that didn't blink. The judge entered, a woman with the exact patience this kind of story deserves. Her eyes said, keep your drama, hand me your paper. Our consent decree spoke first. Counsel read stipulations in a voice that made them bricks. Board members, new ones, stood and accepted obligations. Independent auditor appointed, public portal for all enforcement actions, mandatory board training on fiduciary duty. Refund schedule established for every bogus fine and consulting siphon. The judge signed, pen scratching like a saw through dry pine. Next, the declaratory judgment, the boundary, the line, jurisdiction ends at the recorded plat. The forest is mine, the gavel ticked, not loud, loud enough. Liens dissolved with a clerk's keystroke, digital cobwebs vanishing from my title. The $1.2 million they had dangled over my home evaporated like fog under noon sun. The president's attorney read a court-approved apology. Clinical, precise, no excuses. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like something sturdier, a beam set straight. Outside, microphones reached like cattails. I said little. We asked for law, I told them. We got it. Then I went home to do the only thing that made sense after paper finally held. We carried cedar into the forest like a procession. Neighbors came wearing work gloves and a look I'd never seen on their faces, a combination of relief and ownership, the kind that wants to maintain, not control. Tom brought a level. The veteran brought a socket set. Mrs. Lang brought sandwiches wrapped in wax paper the way her mother had taught her. We set posts deeper than required. We overspec'd the bolts. We checked plumb until it made my son groan and grin at the same time. Then we raised the platform in slow inches, hands under beams like lifters under a bar. The frame took the light and gave it back warm. I pulled out the brass plate, 4 screws, a quiet little ceremony. I read the engraving so my son could hear it in my voice, for the kids who were told no when safe was possible. He touched the letters with the tip of his finger as if they might smear. They didn't. We strung a small solar lantern under the roof's edge. Tom flipped his cap backward and wired it into the charge controller like it was a task set by a master he respected. When the light blinked alive, someone clapped once, then everyone did, shy at first, then sure. At the gate, I mounted the recorded covenant in a weatherproof box. It looked like a museum placard because that's what it was. An exhibit of a boundary, a reminder that lines can heal when used right. Late, under that first small pool of light, I sat on the steps with my boy. He leaned into my shoulder and exhaled the fear of months. "It's ours," he said. "It's everyone's who respects it," I answered. He nodded. "He gets it. Stewardship, not power." When we left, I turned back. The cedar looked like a quiet ship in a sea of needles, a place, not a fight, the kind of thing that goes on. Spring came hard and generous. Buds punched out of branches. The creek spoke louder. Audit checks landed in mailboxes like apologies with signatures you could frame. The new board, fresh eyes, regular jobs, tired of drama, rewrote bylaws with neighbors in the room and coffee that tasted like community, not control. Fines became warnings with paths to fix. Variances became conversations. Meetings ended with people shaking hands instead of jaws. I met the school superintendent at the gate with a folder and a promise. We mapped science days under the canopy, field notebooks on clipboards, kids learning to count rings and listen to birds without scaring them away. Scouts booked trailwork Saturdays, gloves on small hands, a type of authority you can trust, tools, tasks, completion. Each group got a permit and a talk. They left with a lesson that hangs heavier than any sign. Boundaries are where respect lives. I funded a small scholarship out of selective timber thinning, not flashy, enough to buy someone's first set of survey instruments or cover a semester for a kid who wants to learn trees. The check stub said what my mouth didn't need to: take what hurt us and turn it into someone else's beginning. Parents who'd shouted in my face the loudest still avoided my eye at first. Then they didn't. A handshake here. A thank you said as if it might bite. I took neither personally. Everyone had learned something. Some lessons sting longer. The president put her home on the market. The listing said quiet cul-de-sac near Greenbelt. The comments asked about the scandal. I didn't gloat. I didn't speak her name again. The record held it where it belongs, in a file that says what happened and why it won't again. One afternoon, I found my son under the cedar roof with a book about bridges, legs swinging, boots scuffed. He pointed at a diagram and said, "This is why it didn't fall." He meant the platform. He meant our house. He meant us. I ruffled his hair and let the canopy answer. At the gate, I posted one more sign, not a rule, a reminder. This land exists to teach stewardship. If your leaders use power to harm, show your kids how to choose better ones. People read it and looked a little older in a good way. The covenant remains. No recreational access for HOA members and households. Permanent. Some call it harsh. It isn't. It's a scar you can see so you don't reopen the wound without noticing. The forest opened wider to everyone else on paper on purpose. Law over chaos, not vengeance, maintenance. This story was never about a treehouse. It was about a line. What you do when someone drags it across your child's life and calls it order. We moved the line back where it belonged and bolted it to the ground. If you felt your chest tighten at the red letters on my door, if you saw your street in hours, then you already know the moral. Stand your ground with paper and patience. Build what lasts. Let your kids watch you do it so they inherit more than a house, they inherit a way. Now tell me this in the comments. Seriously, I read them. Where are you watching from and what part hit you hardest? Drop a like so this story reaches someone who needs it, and leave one good sentence about a boundary you plan to defend. That's how we build more places the ground remembers.